The storm that night was cruel, tearing through the valley with roaring winds that shook every window in Willow Creek. Inside a dimly lit cabin, Clara Hayes sat by the fire, clutching an old letter, her fingers trembling. The words blurred through her tears. "Your husband will arrive on the next stagecoach, husband." The word burned her chest. She hadn't ordered him. Her aunt had. And when she saw his name on the letter, her heart nearly stopped. Ethan Cole, the man who once pulled her from a river and vanished years ago. Clara's heart raced as she remembered that stormy day 5 years ago. She had been trapped in the rushing waters after her horse slipped. Ethan, a drifter then, had risked his life to save her. She had never forgotten the warmth of his arms or the way he'd whispered, "You'll live, I promise." But he'd disappeared before dawn. Now, fate was bringing him back, only this time, as her mail-order husband. She couldn't decide if it was a miracle or a cruel twist of destiny. Morning light crept across the cabin floor as Clara stood before the mirror, smoothing her worn dress. She had no money, no family left, and her aunt's debts weighed on her shoulders. The marriage arrangement was meant to save her from losing the cabin. But how could she marry Ethan, knowing he had once been her savior? "He can't be my husband," she whispered to her reflection. "He saved my life once." Her voice cracked, heavy with both fear and longing. The stagecoach wheels screeched outside, startling her. She rushed to the window, her breath catching as a tall man stepped down. Dust-covered boots, weathered hat, that familiar stride. Ethan Cole had changed. Broader shoulders, older eyes, a quiet strength that made the world slow around him. He glanced toward the cabin, and for a moment, their eyes met through the glass. It felt like time folded, bringing back the echo of his voice over the roar of a river. Ethan paused before the cabin door, removing his hat. He'd taken this journey knowing only that a woman in need awaited him. He didn't expect her, Clara Hayes, the girl he once saved, the one he thought he'd lost to another life. His heart twisted with disbelief and something deeper, something that had never truly left. When the door opened, silence filled the space between them, thick with memory and unspoken words. "Clara," he said softly, "it's been a long time." Her eyes shimmered with tears as she stepped aside, letting him in. The air carried the faint scent of rain and pine. "You shouldn't have come," she murmured. "This isn't right." Ethan studied her face, the traces of pain, the tiredness in her eyes. "I didn't know it was you," he replied, his voice low. "But now that I do, I'm not walking away." His words struck her like thunder, steadfast, stubborn, familiar. The same man who once risked everything to keep her alive was standing before her again, ready to save her one more time. As the evening settled, they sat by the fire, silence stretching between them. Clara's fingers brushed the rim of her teacup, her thoughts tangled. She told him about her aunt's death, the debts, the marriage order she never wanted. Ethan listened, every word sinking into him like a blade. "You deserved better," he said. "Not a paper promise from a stranger." His eyes burned with something unspoken, protection, guilt, love. And though neither said it aloud, they both knew this arrangement was far more than coincidence. Outside, the storm returned, thunder rolling through the hills. Ethan rose, checking the door, his instincts sharp. "You still live alone out here?" he asked. She nodded faintly. "Only me now." He frowned. "Then I'm staying the night." She tried to protest, but his tone left no room. "It's safer," he added. Something in his voice softened. Her resistance. She nodded, heart pounding. Somewhere deep inside, the memory of his arms pulling her from the water returned, and she wondered if this storm, too, was meant to bring him back to her. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She watched the fire flicker, casting shadows over Ethan's sleeping form by the hearth. He looked peaceful, yet burdened, as if the world rested heavy on his shoulders. She whispered into the silence, "Why did you come back to me?" The only reply was the crackle of the fire, and the quiet rhythm of his breath. For the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely alone. But she also knew that when morning came, she'd have to face the truth. Her heart belonged to the man who wasn't meant to be hers. Morning sunlight broke through the thin curtains, painting the cabin in soft gold. Clara stirred awake, the memory of last night still hovering around her like mist. She found Ethan already outside, chopping wood with steady, powerful strokes. His movements were calm but filled with purpose, like a man trying to silence the noise inside him. When he saw her at the doorway, he smiled faintly. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She shook her head, clutching her shawl tighter. "I kept wondering why you stayed," she admitted softly. Ethan rested the axe, wiping sweat from his brow. "Because you needed someone," he said simply. "And I owed you that much." Clara frowned. "Owed me? You saved my life, Ethan." He looked at her with a shadowed expression. "No, I left before I could make sure you were truly safe. I've lived with that guilt every day since." His voice carried both regret and affection. She didn't know what to say, only that her heart ached at his honesty. For the first time, she realized that maybe he needed saving, too. Later, as they shared breakfast, a knock shattered the quiet morning. Clara froze. Few people came this far into the valley. Ethan opened the door to find Mr. Grayson, a land agent with a sneer too sharp for kindness. "Miss Hayes," he announced, "you're 2 weeks overdue on payment. By sundown, this land belongs to the bank." Clara's hands trembled. "Please, I just need time." "No time left," Grayson cut her off. "Unless you've found yourself a husband willing to pay." His mocking tone lingered like poison. Ethan's jaw tightened. "She has one," he said firmly, stepping between them. Grayson's brows lifted. "You?" Ethan nodded, voice hard as steel. "I'm her husband by contract. And I'll pay what's owed." Clara stared at him, stunned. She hadn't told him about the full debt, the ranch, the taxes, the loan her aunt took. It was more money than Ethan could possibly have. But in that moment, he looked like a man who'd rather fight the world than see her hurt again. "By tomorrow morning," Grayson sneered. "Or the cabin's mine." When the door closed, Clara turned on him. "Why did you say that? You don't have that kind of money." He met her eyes, calm and certain. "Then I'll find it." She shook her head, tears rising. "You can't fix this with courage, Ethan. Not this time." But he only smiled faintly. "You forget. I'm not just a drifter anymore. I work for the cattle company up north. I have savings." Her lips parted in disbelief. "You'd spend it. For me." He stepped closer, voice low. "For us." And before she could respond, he turned and saddled his horse. The day stretched long as Clara waited. The storm clouds gathered again, dark and heavy over the horizon. Every clap of thunder twisted her chest tighter. She remembered the last time he'd ridden away from her, 5 years ago, into the dawn. What if history repeated itself? What if this time, he didn't come back? By nightfall, the wind howled through the cracks, and she sat by the fire, clutching the shawl he'd left behind. Tears blurred her vision. "Please come back," she whispered. Just before dawn, the distant echo of hooves reached her ears. She ran outside barefoot, heart pounding. Through the fog, Ethan emerged, soaked, exhausted, but smiling. He dismounted and handed her a small leather pouch. Inside were coins, glinting like captured sunlight. "It's done," he said breathlessly. "Your land's safe." She couldn't speak. Her hands trembled as she touched his arm. "You did this for me." He laughed softly. "No, Clara, I did it because I never stopped loving you." Her breath caught. All those years of waiting, wondering, denying, every emotion flooded through her like the river that had once nearly taken her life. "Ethan," she whispered, tears spilling freely. "I thought I'd lost you forever." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You never lost me. I just needed time to become the man you deserved." His voice cracked with emotion. She stepped into his arms, feeling the world settle into peace at last. Weeks passed, and the cabin began to change. The roof was mended, the fields green again. Ethan's laughter filled the air, and Clara found herself smiling more than she had in years. The townsfolk whispered about the mail-order marriage that had turned real, about the woman who found love in the man who once saved her life. One evening, as they watched the sun dip behind the hills, Ethan took her hand. "Still think I can't be your husband?" he teased. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder, the light catching her tears of joy. "You were never supposed to be my husband," she whispered. "You were supposed to be my miracle." Ethan smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Then I guess miracles happen twice." The wind carried the scent of spring through the valley, and as the stars blinked awake above them, Clara knew this was where her story began. Not with a letter or a promise, but with the man who had always been her home.